Our next guest will weigh in with the pros and cons of a potential $500 million federal rescue of Spirit Airlines. President Trump actually mentioned the idea in an interview on Squawk Box last week.
I don't like it. No, I don't mind mergers. I think I'd love somebody to buy Spirit, as an example. You know, Spirit's in trouble, and I'd love somebody to buy Spirit. It's 14,000 jobs, and maybe the federal government should help that one out. You know, I told my people, but with American, it's doing fine, and United's doing very well. I know the United people, they're doing very well. I don't like having them merge. It's just like all of these aerospace defense companies and aerospace.
Joining us now is Sara Nelson. She is the international president of the Association of Flight Attendants, which last week put out a letter supporting the idea of government help for Spirit. Also, Advancing American Freedom senior fellow Joel Griffith. And folks, welcome to both of you. Look, President Trump said last week here that he would love to see somebody else buy Spirit, but if not, maybe the federal government should get involved with this. Sara, you put out a letter of support. Why would you like to see government support here? Just jobs?
Well, this is definitely about jobs, but this is also about a unique moment in the industry. So Spirit has been recovering from COVID ever since and had 40 airplanes set on the ground because of the problems with the recall of the Pratt & Whitney engines. And then here we are. What they tried to do was merge with another airline, with JetBlue, in order to fix their financial situation, and that was called off. Here we are now in this situation where we have a brand new CEO who is taking Spirit to a new place to be able to restructure. And in the middle of that restructuring, we had the Iran war start, where fuel prices spiked. So this is a unique scenario where the rest of the industry is cutting capacity. No one's going to be interested in buying an airline while they're cutting capacity. We need to bridge this to a place where we can get to a place of a merger, or Spirit being able to exit bankruptcy and exist alone and keep the service in markets that really need it. There are some airports that are going to lose service completely. A lot of people will lose choice. Spirit keeps airfares low, and that competition is important. And this is a unique moment in time where we have real life people who are on the verge of losing healthcare, of losing their jobs, and a ripple effect across the economy, including the communities that will lose the hospitality and other investments in their communities. So this is a good way to invest in the American people. And I think that that is the definition of freedom, actually.
Hey, Joel, let's talk a little bit about the timing on this, because you can certainly argue that the financial crisis was a unique moment in time. COVID, obviously a unique moment in time. We're 5 years past that, though. Does this rise, you think, to the level of a unique moment in time that the government needs to step in and help out?
No, this is not a unique moment in time. In fact, the only way this is unique is that we have a Republican presidential administration threatening to nationalize an airline. And look, the Biden administration was wrong to kill the merger between JetBlue and Spirit. That killed nearly $30 billion worth of shareholder value. But the solution of this is not now to nationalize or bail out Spirit. The disappearance of Spirit Air, if it were to fail, this is not going to impact the broader economy, of course. Spirit Air only has around 3% of all domestic flights. We have 84 other airlines to choose from. And if Spirit Air were to go bankrupt, it's not as if the aircraft disappear or the routes disappear. Those aircraft, if it's not in a merger, will be sold to other airlines, including Frontier and Allegiant. And guess what? All of those routes, other airlines will have the opportunity to absorb those connections. This will not be a disaster for air travel. And as someone who enjoys flying Spirit, this is an unfortunate situation, but it's been a long time coming. Spirit Airlines has been losing money each and every year since 2020. They lose nearly 12 cents for every dollar of revenue. This is not due to the current situation in Iran with higher fuel prices. This has been long-time mismanagement and a long-time accumulation of debt.
Hey, Sara, even the Washington Post editorial board, which isn't normally seen as a far-right editorial board, published a piece this week saying America doesn't need another Amtrak of the skies. They say Americans would be better off if the federal government just lit that money on fire, that the Spirit's failure poses no systemic risk to air travel. The administration has no business picking winners and losers in a competitive industry.
Say, Becky, I do want to clear up one thing. This is not about the government running Spirit Airlines. This is about making it possible for Spirit to continue to operate until it can operate on its own or be able to be strong enough to be merging with another airline. The idea that people are going to pick up Spirit and all of its assets and its employees and keep the obligations to them is just not correct. What we're talking about here is simply writing it out through a period of time where Spirit will not be able to exist. We're talking about days here where people are going to lose the tickets that they bought. They're going to lose that affordability. Fort Lauderdale, 27% of the market in Fort Lauderdale is Spirit. There is in the Arnold Palmer Regional Airport, which provides service for people in Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. That would go away completely. Atlantic City, go away completely.
Sarah,
we're talking about an immediate harm here that can be staved off. And these are real people who are going to lose their jobs. It's actually 19,000 people.
Sarah, can I ask a separate question?
Direct employees? Yes, absolutely, Andrew. Just 1 second. 19,000 people between the direct employees and the contractors who will suddenly be out of work, out of their health care, people who are getting ready to have babies or in the middle of cancer treatments and everything else. So we need to think about how we're supporting the American people, those who are buying the tickets and those who are working at Spirit Airlines right now. Sarah,
you and I have had vigorous debates over the years, especially during the pandemic, about the bailouts of the airline industry. And I had some sympathy, not a lot of sympathy, but some sympathy for those bailouts during that period, given the uniqueness of that moment. My question to you is, do you believe that airlines are ultimately government utilities to some degree? Because if they are, then they should be managed in a very, very different way.
Well, what I do believe is that the airline industry is the backbone of the economy. And the idea of deregulation was to create competition. But what we've seen is a consolidation of power. The idea that it's going to be a Frontier that's going to pick up the pieces of Spirit when Frontier is also struggling is just not correct.
You supported the merger of JetBlue and Spirit.
Say that again?
You supported the merger of JetBlue and Spirit. And now you're telling me consolidation's too much?
No, absolutely, Andrew, because what we said with JetBlue and Spirit was that the JetBlue-Spirit merger was the anti-merger merger. It was going to actually give an opportunity to compete with the big three and inject more competition into the airline industry. So that is our argument with the merger of JetBlue and Spirit, and we would have liked to have seen that happen, because we believe it would have created more competitive advantage for the American people.
But Sarah, don't you think either you have to decide that this is you're in a utility business, in which case they should be regulated completely and utterly like utilities and treated as such, or they're a competitive business. And by the way, some of these routes you're talking about could ultimately get picked up by other airlines. I mean,
and in the meantime, people are going to get hurt. So they're not going to get to their graduations. They're not going to get to their families. They're not going to get to their people who are hurting. There are many people who say that they've flown on Spirit for the first time because they were able to afford it on Spirit Airlines.
Do you think that the airline industry is a special class of people that work there relative to every other industry in the country? So any other time a company is about to go out of business, the government's supposed to step in to help them? I mean, that's why this is as complicated as it is.
What I believe, Andrew, is that the airline industry touches every other industry and touches every single community. And so investing in the airline industry is investing in the American people.
But then they should be treated as utilities. And then you should all be government employees and we can have a different conversation.
And where we are right now is that it is a competitive market, but this is a moment in time where this has been disrupted in a major way by decisions of the government, both administrations. And so it's time to step in and make sure that they can be propped up, not lose those tickets for people who are able to travel, and invest in the American people. This is going to hurt the economy at just the wrong time. And so it's not just about Spirit Airlines. This really is about how this is going to impact the American people across the board.
I just think it's really great to see you and President Trump on the same page. Sarah.
Joe, I love you.
That's what really warms the cockles of my soul. And mad at the Biden administration for not letting the merger go through. This is good.
I think that there's a responsibility by the government to look out, sure, for the markets, but also to look out for the American people. There's a bigger responsibility here. And so I agree that it's time to invest in Spirit in this way, there will be a return to the American people, and the government is not going to run this airline. That is not a good idea. I agree with Joel on that.
MAGA Sara.
But we have a great CEO who can.
Never
Dave
thought
Davis,
it.
who knows
My
how to
God,
do
I
it.
say it.
I can't,
MAGA Sara. I never
I
thought
let
I'd.
Joel have another word here.
I just need to say to Sara, when Microsoft lays off 10% of its workforce, or you hear about 10,000 employees getting, it's wild to me that we're having I understand the importance of airlines, but again, it's wild to me that somehow you believe that your team of people is a special class relative to every other American. And if you believe that these airlines are so important in terms of travel, which it is, then I think you should be arguing and lobbying for them to become government utilities. And you should be a government employee, and that's what it should be.
To be clear, I don't think that airline employees are a special class. I don't think that those layoffs at Microsoft should have happened either. We need to be investing in the American people. That's how we grow a strong economy. And so this isn't just, this is about the immediate issue at Spirit. We will not be able to put this back together.
Sarah, I got to let Joel have another word. They've been trying to wrap us for 3 minutes, and Joel has only gotten one. Joel has only gotten to talk once. So let's let Joel say something before we have to go, because we're way over time. Joel?
Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Becky. Let's keep a few big things in mind here. First of all, Sarah's union has been part of the problem. The labor contracts that have been negotiated at Spirit have not been in the best interest of Spirit employees or the company, and that's because those contracts have
employees have taken concessions, Joel. They've taken concessions.
If I can finish 1 second here, the new contracts that went into place increase labor costs at Spirit to be more on par with some of the higher cost airlines like Delta, and more importantly, diminish the flexibility of those labor arrangements. That's part of the reason why Spirit has not been able to bounce back post-COVID. But this is not a situation. Wait, one more second here. We also need to keep in mind, Spirit only has about 4% of the total market share for domestic flights. This is not going to impact most flyers, so those routes are going to be absorbed. And this underscores that this is not just the bailout of the hedge funds that bought up Spirit debt at 40 cents on the dollar. They're going to double and triple their money. This is also a bailout of the union leaders at Spirit who have run Spirit into the ground. And sure, they don't want those contracts to go
Joel,
away.
that is not fair. This is about average people. This is not about union leaders. This is about the fact that Spirit employees make on average about 30 to 40% less than those mainline carriers. So what your argument is just simply not true.
It shows up in the financial statements each and every quarter, unfortunately.
Okay, as a percentage of what Spirit is paying to all of its employees and all of the revenue. But those employees are making way less than the other mainline carriers, and that is competitive. The labor costs are competitive.